Let me tell you about something that happened last winter here in Scranton. You might have heard about it on the evening news. Channel 6 ran the story for weeks, but what they showed on television wasn't the half of it. This is about Nathan Coleman, who came back from Afghanistan missing both legs, but found something he didn't even know he'd lost. It's about 47 dogs that everybody said were too damaged to save. And it's about what happened on the coldest night in January, when those dogs did something that made Walter Cronkite himself, God rest his soul, would have called remarkable. Now, I know how this sounds, like one of those feel-good stories they run at Christmas, but I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. And once you hear what really happened in that alley behind the old Bradley Steel plant, you'll understand why folks are still talking about it at the VFW Hall every Friday night. Nathan Coleman could taste blood. That copper penny taste that takes you right back to places you'd rather forget. The frozen alley concrete felt like a slab of ice against his cheek, so cold it burned. His artificial legs, the ones the VA had finally gotten right after 3 tries, lay in pieces around him like somebody had taken a sledgehammer to a couple of $1,000 machines. The titanium knee joint on the right one had snapped clean through. The left ankle was hanging by wires, making little sparking sounds in the dark. He couldn't feel his ribs anymore. That was probably bad. When you stop feeling the hurt, that's when you know you're in real trouble. Through the fog in his head, Nathan heard them walking away. Travis McKenna's steel-toed work boots crunching on the gravel. Brody shuffling like he always did when he was nervous. Dean dragging something metal along the brick wall. They were leaving him here in 19-degree weather to freeze or bleed out, whichever came first. With the wind chill, it felt like the kind of cold that used to seep through the walls of his daddy's deer hunting cabin up in the Poconos. The German shepherd they'd been beating was trying to drag itself toward him, even with its hind leg clearly broken. Poor creature's breathing came in little white puffs in the freezing air, each one smaller than the last. But it kept trying to reach him, like somehow they were in this together. "Echo," Nathan whispered through lips that were already splitting from the cold. He didn't know why he gave the dog a name, maybe because every living thing deserved to be called something before it met its maker. Maybe because those brown eyes, scared but still fighting, reminded him of another dog in another place where the sand burned instead of froze. The dog's tongue, warm as fresh coffee, touched his outstretched fingers. Then Nathan heard something, or felt it, more like. The ground started trembling, like when the freight trains used to run through town before they shut down the steel mills. The first shadow appeared at the mouth of the alley, big as a small bear, moving with purpose. Then another, and another. Travis stopped walking, maybe 40 feet away. What in the Sam Hill? Rex came out of the darkness first, 130 pounds of Rottweiler, moving steady and sure like Nathan had spent all those months teaching him. The dog didn't charge, didn't growl, just planted himself between Travis and the way out, head low, ready. Luna came next, that white husky coat of hers bright as fresh snow under the streetlight, taking her position at the east end of the alley. Then Diesel, the pit bull everyone at the pound said couldn't be saved, blocking the west side. One by one they appeared. Shadow, the black lab, Storm, the Belgian Malinois, Duke, the Mastiff, Bella, the Shepherd mix. 47 dogs in all, forming circles like wagon trains used to, 3 deep around the alley. These ain't strays. Brody's voice cracked like a teenager's. He was right. Stray dogs don't move like soldiers. Strays don't keep perfect spacing between each other. Strays don't set up a search and rescue perimeter like they'd been trained by someone who'd done it in a war zone. Travis raised the rebar he'd been carrying. "Get out of here. Go on, get." Not a single dog moved. Not one. Then, like somebody had given them a signal only they could hear, they started barking. Not the crazy noise of a pack of wild dogs, but a pattern. 3 short barks, 3 long ones, 3 short. Mrs. Kowalski, Margaret O'Brien before she married Stanley Kowalski back in '68, recognized it right away from her apartment window above the old bakery. Her daddy had taught her Morse code when she was just a girl, back when he was teaching her about the war. "Mother Mary," she breathed, reaching for the telephone on the kitchen wall. That's an SOS. Within minutes, you could hear sirens coming from all directions. But those dogs didn't scatter like you'd expect. They held their ground even as the police cars pulled up, even as the ambulance arrived, even as half the neighborhood came out in their housecoats and slippers to see what all the commotion was about. Officer Johnson, who'd done 2 tours as a Marine before coming home to be a cop like his father, approached Rex real slow. "Easy there, boy. We need to get to him." Rex turned his big head toward Nathan's crumpled form, then back to Johnson. That dog stepped aside, just enough for one person to squeeze through. "They're letting us through," the young EMT said, voice full of wonder. "One at a time, like they're controlling who gets in." Grace Mitchell pushed through the crowd, her veterinary bag clutched against her wool coat. She'd been home making supper when her telephone started ringing off the hook. Neighbors calling to tell her about dogs holding 3 men cornered in the alley behind where Bradley Steele used to be. But Grace knew these dogs, every last one of them. "Rex, down," she said, firm but gentle. The Rottweiler dropped to his belly right away, his tail giving a little wag of recognition. The EMTs got to Nathan first. His pulse was weak but hanging on. Multiple ribs broken, possible skull fracture, body temperature dropping fast. But alive, thank the good Lord, still alive. As they lifted Nathan onto the stretcher, his eyes fluttered open for just a second. He looked right at Rex, standing there at attention like a soldier. Nathan's fingers moved just a little. 3 taps against the stretcher rail. Every single dog sat down at the exact same time. "Dear Lord in heaven," somebody in the crowd whispered. "They're his dogs. Every last one of them is his." Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. 14 hours earlier. The phantom pain struck at 4:17 in the morning, same as always. Nathan's eyes snapped open to darkness, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Fire raced through legs that weren't there anymore. The nerves didn't care that there was nothing below his knees but air. His fingers fumbled across the apple crate he used as a nightstand until they found the prescription bottle. 3 pills left until his VA appointment next Friday. The tablet stuck in his dry throat. He forced it down and waited, counting his heartbeats until they slowed back down to something that wouldn't worry a doctor. Ice had formed inside the shipping container overnight. The space heater had quit again, probably the same busted wire that gave out every time the temperature dropped below 20. His breath came out in white clouds, like smoking those Lucky Strikes his grandfather used to keep in his shirt pocket. Nathan swung what was left of his legs over the edge of the army cot and reached for the prosthetics. The carbon fiber was cold enough to burn his fingers. He strapped them on the way he'd done every morning for 2 years. Left one first, then right, checking each buckle twice. The right knee joint stuck, made a grinding sound like his father's old Ford when it needed oil, then released. Coffee came from a jar of instant Folgers heated on a hot plate that had seen better days. Black, no sugar, same way his daddy drank it at the steel mill for 30 years. Outside, his breath froze the moment it hit the air. The quarter-mile walk to the main kennel took him past 47 chain-link runs, and 47 dogs started their morning chorus. Not alarm barking. These were welcome home sounds, each voice distinct as family members calling from different rooms. Walter Harrison stood by the office door, squinting at papers in his shaking hands. Even from 20 yards away, Nathan could see the tremor had gotten worse. The diabetes was winning. "Bank notice?" Nathan asked, though he already knew. Walter's clouded eyes stayed on the paper. Final warning, 47,000 by February 15th. That gives us 30 days. Gives us nothing. Walter's voice came out bitter as black coffee. "I'm 72 years old, Nathan. Can't hardly see. Hands shake too much to handle a leash anymore." The old man pulled out another paper. "Travis McKenna came by yesterday, offered 15,000 cash for the whole place. This land's worth 200,000, I know, but 15,000 today beats the sheriff's padlock next month." Nathan watched Rex pacing his run, that massive head tracking their every word like he understood what was at stake. That's when Nathan noticed them. fresh tire tracks in the frost, leading straight to the quarantine building's back gate. The padlock hung open. Bolt cutters had left fresh scratches on the metal. Nathan traced the tire tracks with his eyes. Fresh rubber marks cut deep through the morning frost, leading straight from the back gate to the quarantine building. Whoever came through here had been in a hurry. The tracks swerved wide around the corner, clipping the fence post. The quarantine building smelled like pine disinfectant and fear sweat. That particular smell scared dogs give off that's nothing like regular dog smell. In the corner kennel, the newest rescue cowered against the chain link. German Shepherd mix, maybe 40 pounds underweight, mange scars across her haunches. Nathan had named her Nova yesterday, after the way her eyes had sparked with just a touch of hope when he'd offered her a piece of bologna from his lunch. Someone had been in here. Nova's water bowl was tipped over, the fresh hay he'd laid down yesterday scattered across the concrete. Nathan's prosthetic scraped against the floor as he knelt, that grinding sound from his right knee getting worse. Nova's whole body trembled, but her nose twitched toward him. Easy, girl. He pushed 2 fingers through the chain link, knuckles first, the way you're supposed to with scared dogs. She'd been a bait dog. He could tell from the puncture scars around her muzzle, the way her ears had been chewed down to nubs. The fighting rings used dogs like her to teach the fighters how to kill. Footsteps on gravel. Nathan turned to find Grace Mitchell in the doorway, her veterinary bag hanging heavy from her shoulder. Dark circles under her eyes meant her daughter Emma had probably had another seizure last night. The special medicine cost $300 a month, and Grace was already working 3 jobs. Heard about the bank notice, she said, setting down her bag. Walter called me at 5 this morning. We'll figure something out. With what money, Nathan? She pulled out a syringe, started preparing antibiotics for Nova. I haven't been paid in 2 months. Only reason I'm here is… She stopped, jaw working like she was chewing on words she didn't want to say. These dogs don't deserve to die just because we're all broke. Through the dusty window, Nathan watched Walter's pickup disappear down the access road. The old man hadn't even stayed for morning feeding. First time in 15 years. Someone broke in last night, Nathan said. Cut the back lock. Grace examined the empty kennel next to Nova's. They take anything? Not that I can see. She slipped the needle into Nova's scruff, quick and smooth. Probably kids looking for trouble, or maybe someone hunting for copper pipe to sell. But Nathan knew better. Kids would have spray-painted something, left beer cans. Copper thieves would have hit the main building where the old pipes ran through the walls. The morning training went hard. Rex kept breaking his downstay, those brown eyes locked on the perimeter fence instead of Nathan. Luna wouldn't heel proper, kept pulling toward the woods. Even Diesel, who usually focused like a laser pointer, kept sniffing the air and whining low in his throat. By 6 o'clock, Nathan had worked with all 47 dogs plus Nova. The stumps where his legs ended were raw inside the prosthetic sockets. That particular burning that meant blisters were forming. Sweat had frozen his undershirt to his back. Each step sent lightening up nerve pathways that ended in nothing. He chose the long route home, 3 miles through the old industrial district instead of 1 mile down Main Street. This way, he avoided the dinner crowd at Murphy's Diner, the folks coming out of evening service at First Methodist. All those sympathetic looks and thank you for your services that came with that particular tone. Half pity, half relief that it wasn't them coming home missing pieces. The Lackawanna Steel Complex stretched out like dinosaur bones against the winter sky. Nathan's prosthetics echoed off the empty buildings. Click, scrape, click, scrape. His breath came harder now, the right knee joint clicking with every step like a playing card in bicycle spokes. Should have brought his cane. Pride was expensive when you were walking on $20,000 of hardware that needed $10,000 in maintenance. The smell hit him first at 741, copper and iron, like pennies and rust. Then the sound. Metal on meat. A sound he knew from Kandahar, from the fighting rings they'd raided, from dreams where Ranger's eyes went dark while Nathan's hands tried to hold his insides inside. Nathan forced himself forward. The sound came from an alley between 2 warehouses, where the old loading docks made shadows darker than the rest of the night. He counted his steps from the corner, 17 steps to where he could see them clear. 3 men stood around something pressed against a dumpster. Travis McKenna holding a piece of rebar. Brody Novak blocking the east side. Dean Sawyer at the west, tapping a metal pipe against his palm like he was keeping time to music only he could hear. The German Shepherd was backed against the dumpster, right hind leg dragging useless, blood matting the fur along its ribs. Male, maybe 2 years old, ribs showing through his coat like fence posts. His lips pulled back, showing teeth, but Nathan knew that look. Not mean, just hurt and scared. Travis raised the rebar again. "Should have stayed out of my truck, you mangy mutt." The dog tried to stand. His back leg buckled, and he went down hard on his side. Nathan stepped into the alley. His right prosthetic slipped on black ice, caught, held. That's enough. 3 heads turned his way. Travis's mouth twisted into something ugly. "Well, look what crawled out of the old soldier's home." He didn't lower the rebar. "The hell you want, Coleman?" "Dogs down. You made your point." "My point?" Travis stepped closer. Nathan could smell the Jim Beam on his breath, mixed with Marlboros and something sour. "This mutt was in my truck, probably rabid, could have bit someone." "He's hungry, not rabid." Nathan kept his voice level, measuring distances. 8 feet to Travis, 12 to Brody, 15 to Dean. The right knee actuator locked up right then, frozen solid. "You some kind of expert now?" Dean moved closer, that pipe still tapping against his thigh. "I train dogs." "You shovel dog crap at that shelter." Travis's knuckles went white around the rebar. Big difference between that and being an expert. Nathan shifted his weight to the left leg, trying to force the right knee to unlock. Nothing. The mechanism was frozen solid in this cold. "Just let me take him," Nathan said. "I'll get him to Doc Mitchell." "With what money?" Travis laughed, phlegm thick in his throat. "Heard the bank's taking your little puppy farm next month. Maybe you should worry about your own problems." Travis turned back toward the dog, rebar rising. Nathan moved without thinking. 3 steps on one good leg and one locked one, throwing his body forward. His shoulder caught Travis in the ribs. Both men went down hard on the frozen alley floor, Nathan's prosthetic snapping at the ankle joint with a sound like a rifle shot. The rebar clattered away across the concrete. Nathan tried to push himself up. His legs wouldn't work. One prosthetic shattered, the other locked at the knee. He crawled forward on his elbows, dragging himself between Travis and the dog. "You stupid!" Travis's steel-toed boot caught Nathan in the ribs. Something cracked inside his chest. Dean's pipe came down on Nathan's shoulder. White fire exploded down his arm. Nathan pulled himself forward another foot, spreading his body over the German Shepherd. The dog's breath came hot and quick against his neck. Another blow. This one to his lower back, just above where flesh met titanium. Nathan's vision started going dark around the edges. Through the growing blackness, he reached back, found warm fur sticky with blood. "Echo," he whispered, tasting copper in his mouth. "Your name is Echo." The dog's tongue, rough and warm, touched his palm. "Hold him down." Travis's voice seemed to come from very far away. "I ain't done with him yet." Nathan tried to move. Nothing worked. His cheek pressed against the frozen concrete. He watched Travis pick up the rebar. That's when he felt it. A vibration in the ground, getting stronger. Travis felt it too. He stopped, rebar half raised, looking toward the alley entrance. A shadow moved across the streetlight. Then another, and another. Rex came out of the shadows like something from an old war movie. Slow, deliberate, every muscle controlled. 130 pounds of Rottweiler, not running, not charging, just walking with the same measured pace Nathan had drilled into him every morning for 18 months. No sound except his nails clicking on the frozen pavement. Travis's arm stayed frozen mid-swing, the rebar catching the streetlight. What in the... Luna appeared at the east end of the alley. Her white coat glowed under the sodium lamp like fresh snow on Christmas morning. Those pale blue eyes locked onto Brody, who took a step backward, his heels scraping against broken glass. The husky's breath came out in perfect white puffs. 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out. The breathing pattern Nathan taught for when the dogs got worked up. Dean's pipe stopped its tapping. "That's a lot of dog right there." Now Diesel emerged from behind the west dumpster. The pit bull everyone at the county shelter said should be put down, said he was ruined from the fighting rings, said he'd never be safe around people. But there he stood, scarred, head tilted just so, studying Dean with the focus of a surgeon looking at an X-ray. Nathan's cheek scraped against the concrete as he tried to turn his head. Through his one good eye, the other was swelling shut, he counted them as they arrived. Shadow, the black lab who'd been left chained to a dead tree for 2 winters. Storm, the Belgian Malinois with cigarette burns dotting her back like constellations. Duke, the mastiff they'd found eating garbage behind the Save-A-Lot, gunpowder in his food to make him mean. 7 dogs. 12. 20. More shadows moving in the darkness beyond the streetlight's reach. They came from everywhere. From the abandoned warehouse, where some denned up for warmth. From the volunteers' houses scattered across the valley. From 3, 4, 5 miles away, like they'd heard a church bell only they could hear. Rex's ears twitched, left one, then right. A signal Nathan recognized from their training. The Rottweiler took 3 measured steps forward, stopped. Luna mirrored him from her position, then Diesel. "Get back!" Travis swung the rebar through empty air. "Get out of here!" The dogs continued their advance. 3 steps, stop, wait. 3 steps, stop, wait. 32 dogs now visible. 35, 40. Nathan's fingers found Echo's fur, sticky with blood that was already freezing in the cold. The injured German shepherd trembled against him, trying to crawl closer despite his broken leg. Blood from Nathan's split scalp dripped onto the dog's muzzle, mixing with the dog's own blood. 44. 45. The dogs arranged themselves in 3 distinct circles, like his drill sergeant used to set up perimeter defense. The inner ring, 6 dogs, the ones Nathan had worked with longest, formed a tight barrier directly around Nathan and Echo. The second ring, 12 dogs, kept 8-foot spacing, every pair of eyes locked on the 3 men. The outer ring, the remaining 29, faced outward, watching for additional threats. Travis's voice cracked like a teenager's. "This ain't right. Dogs don't do this. We're surrounded." Brody let his pipe clatter to the ground. "Travis, we're completely surrounded." Dean tried edging toward the eastern wall. Storm shifted 2 feet left, blocking his path. He stepped right. She adjusted, smooth as a dance partner. "Why ain't they attacking?" Brody whispered, his breath coming in short gasps. Nathan knew why. Hours of repetition in the morning cold, hundreds of times practicing the Guardian protocol, contain the threat, don't engage, create space, call for help. He'd based it on crowd control tactics from Afghanistan, adapted for dogs who'd already seen too much violence. Rex lifted his massive head toward the sky. The bark that came out wasn't random noise. 3 short barks, sharp as hammer strikes, 3 long ones, drawn out like a train whistle, 3 short again. Luna joined immediately, then Diesel. Then all 47 voices created a wall of sound that bounced off the warehouse walls and rolled across the valley like thunder. Mrs. Margaret Kowalski. She'd kept her maiden name O'Brien for business, but used her married name for everything else. Was reheating leftover beef stew on her gas stove when the barking started. The wooden spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. She knew that pattern. Her daddy had taught it to her in 1944, made her practice it over and over. "Might save your life someday, Maggie," he'd said, fresh back from the Pacific with eyes that had seen too much. Her arthritic fingers, the cold always made them worse, fumbled for the yellow phone hanging on the kitchen wall. She dialed the 3 numbers everyone knew by heart. "There's an SOS," she told the dispatcher. The dogs are calling SOS. Something terrible's happening. 3 blocks south, Tom Rodriguez was pulling down the metal grate on his corner store when the barking reached him. 40 years running that shop, he'd heard plenty of dogs, but nothing like this. He pulled out his flip phone. His granddaughter kept trying to get him to upgrade, but this one worked fine, and stepped into the street. Through the little screen, he could see them in the distance. Dozens of dogs in perfect formation, not a single one breaking position. Mother Mary, he breathed, and started walking toward the sound, phone held high like he'd seen the youngsters do. The barking continued. Rhythmic. Insistent. The same pattern over and over, like a broken record that wouldn't stop. Travis tried pushing through the inner circle. Rex simply stepped into his path. Not growling. Not showing teeth. Just an immovable wall of muscle and bone, solid as the old steel mill gates. Move! Travis swung the rebar. Rex leaned back just enough. The rebar whistled past his ear by inches, then returned to his exact position. Dean made a run for it, sprinting toward what looked like a gap between Storm and another dog. The gap closed before he got there. He bounced off Storm's shoulder like he'd hit a brick wall, landed hard on his backside on the ice. Nathan's vision flickered. Dark, light, dark again. Against his palm, he felt Echo's heart beating too fast, like a bird trapped in a box. The dog needed help. They both did. Blue and red lights began painting the alley walls. The sirens grew louder, closer. Officer Mike Johnson stepped out of his patrol car and stopped dead in his tracks. 12 years on the force, 2 tours in Iraq before that, and he'd never seen anything like this. 47 dogs maintaining perfect military discipline. 3 men trapped in the center. And in the middle of it all, a body in a pool of blood, wrapped around an injured German shepherd. Johnson reached for his radio, his hand shaking slightly. I need backup. And ambulances, plural. And, he paused, trying to find words for what he was seeing. And somebody who knows about dogs, a lot of dogs. Grace Mitchell was already throwing on her coat, truck keys in her hand. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing, neighbors calling, texting, sending pictures. Dogs she'd personally given shots to, dogs she'd watched Nathan train every morning for 2 years, dogs everyone said were beyond saving. The EMT crew arrived but stopped at the edge of the formation. The outer ring of dogs hadn't moved an inch. Johnson approached slowly, hands visible, moving like his daddy had taught him to move around their farm dogs. Easy there, boys. We need to get through to help him. Rex turned his massive head, looked Johnson up and down for 3 long seconds, then stepped aside. Just enough space for one person to squeeze through. But when the second EMT tried to follow, Rex moved back into position, solid as a closed door. One at a time, Johnson said, understanding. They're controlling access, one person at a time. The first EMT squeezed through, medical bag clutched against his chest. He knelt beside Nathan, 2 fingers finding the pulse point on his neck. Weak but steady. Multiple ribs broken, skull fracture probable, body temperature dropping fast from lying on the frozen ground. But alive. Still alive. Grace's truck skidded to a stop, throwing gravel. She ran toward the scene, her veterinary bag banging against her hip. The moment her voice rang out, "Rex, down!" the entire formation shifted. The Rottweiler's tail, which had been rigid as a poker, gave a single wag of recognition. Grace Mitchell pressed 2 fingers against Nathan's neck, feeling for the pulse beneath cold skin. His heartbeat stuttered under her touch. 60 beats, then a drop to 40, then racing up to 80 like a motor that couldn't find its rhythm. The alley concrete had turned dark beneath him, blood mixing with motor oil and the rock salt they used on the sidewalks. Bleeding in his brain, the EMT said, sliding the backboard through the slush. We need to move right now. Grace shifted to the German shepherd. Pink foam bubbled at the corners of the dog's mouth with each breath. She'd seen that before. Broken ribs, maybe a punctured lung. His brown eyes tracked her movements, pupils wide but still responding to her penlight. "This one comes too," she said. "Ma'am, we don't transport animals. He's evidence." Officer Johnson stepped forward, notepad already out. Chain of custody for the investigation. The EMT looked at the 47 dogs still holding their positions, then at his partner. They lifted Nathan first, his hand falling away from Echo's fur. His fingers twitched in the air, reaching back even unconscious. Echo tried to follow, dragging his broken body forward with just his front legs. The sound that came from his throat wasn't quite a whine, wasn't quite a howl, something in between that made Grace's chest tighten. Rex's big head swiveled from Echo to Nathan on the stretcher, then back to Echo. The Rottweiler padded forward 3 steps and positioned himself beside the injured shepherd. Luna followed, then Diesel, forming a protective triangle around their injured brother. "They're guarding him," Grace breathed. "The injured one. They're making sure." More sirens. 2 more patrol cars. An animal control van that said county services on the side. Travis's voice cut through everything. "Those dogs attacked us. They're dangerous. Every last one should be put down." Tom Rodriguez from the corner store held his flip phone higher, showing the tiny screen to anyone who'd look. "I got it all on video. Dogs didn't attack nobody. They just stood there." The ambulance doors slammed shut. Grace climbed in beside Nathan. The young EMT was already cutting away Nathan's jacket with those special scissors they use, exposing a torso that looked like someone had painted it purple and black. His prosthetics hung at angles that didn't make sense. The left ankle joint completely separated, wires sparking against metal, until the EMT pulled the battery pack. "Those are VA medical issue," the EMT said, wrapping the destroyed prosthetics in a blanket. 20,000 each, maybe more. Grace looked at the ruined legs, then at Nathan's face. Old burn scars ran from his jaw down his neck, disappearing under the collar they were cutting away. Afghanistan scars, the kind that came with stories nobody wanted to tell. The ambulance lurched forward, sirens screaming. Through the back window, Grace watched the dogs begin to disperse. Not scattered like scared animals, but organized. Rex led one group north toward the old Lutheran church. Luna took another group east toward the river. They moved like soldiers who knew their assignments. St. Mary's trauma bay smelled like floor wax and that particular disinfectant they only used in hospitals. Dr. Marcus Chen, no relation to Harold Chen from the neighborhood, worked with quick, sure movements, calling out observations while nurses moved around Nathan like a choreographed dance. 3 ribs broken, possibly 4. Collarbone fracture. Bleeding in the brain, right temporal region. Core body temperature, 93 degrees. Grace stood in the corner, still wearing her blood-stained coat. Through the reinforced glass window, she could see the parking lot starting to fill up. Word traveled fast in a small city. Channel 6 had sent their van. The Scranton Tribune photographer was already taking pictures. "Are you family?" a nurse asked, clipboard in hand. Grace stopped. What was she? Not family. Not really even a friend. Just the veterinarian who showed up twice a week to treat dogs for free because she couldn't stand watching them suffer. "She's his emergency contact," Officer Johnson said from the doorway. He held up Nathan's wallet, the leather worn soft from years in his pocket. "Listed right here on his VA card." Grace stared at the card. She wasn't his emergency contact. She would have remembered filling out those forms. Johnson met her eyes, gave a small nod. Sometimes the truth was less important than making sure someone had the right to be there. 3 hours into surgery, Grace sat in the waiting room, the plastic chair digging into her back. Her phone buzzed. Emma's medication reminder. Her 12-year-old daughter needed her anti-seizure pills at exactly 9 p.m. or the tremors would start. But her ex-husband could handle it tonight. Had to handle it. Walter Harrison shuffled through the automatic doors, moving even slower than usual. His hands shook worse than she'd ever seen as he lowered himself into the chair beside her. "This is my fault," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Walter, I knew Travis wanted that land. Knew he'd been sniffing around like a dog after a bone. Should have seen this coming. Through the window, Grace could see them. The dogs had come back. One by one, they'd returned to the hospital, taking up positions around the building. Rex sat directly beneath the windows of the surgical wing, still as a statue. Luna paced a precise pattern: 20 feet east, turn; 20 feet west, turn, repeat. Storm had somehow gotten onto the parking garage roof, her silhouette visible against the security lights. "They know which room he's in," Walter whispered. "How do they know that?" 8 hours in. More dogs arrived. Not just the 47 from the training facility, but others. The beagle that lived behind Kowalski's bakery. The 3-legged mutt Nathan fed behind the grocery store every Tuesday. The pair of shepherds from the Nowak farm that Nathan had trained years ago before the family moved to Florida. Somehow they'd come back. Hospital administration was not pleased. Mrs. Patricia Hendricks, the administrator, stood in the hallway with her arms crossed over her navy suit. "This is a health code violation. They need to be removed immediately." "You want to try?" Johnson asked, nodding toward the window. Animal control had attempted it once. The dogs simply moved to the sidewalk, public property. When security tried to shoo them from there, they relocated to the park across the street, maintaining perfect sight lines to the hospital. When Parks and Recreation showed up, they moved to the Lutheran Church parking lot next door. Pastor Williams had already told everyone the dogs were welcome as long as they needed. 16 hours. Nathan still unconscious, still in surgery. Grace found herself beside his bed in recovery, watching the monitors draw mountain ranges of his vital signs. In her coat pocket, a letter worn soft from reading. Her brother David had carried it in Afghanistan, planning to mail it home. Nathan had brought it back instead, along with David's dog tags and his final words. "Tell Grace I'm sorry, I won't make it to Emma's birthday." She'd never thanked Nathan for that. Never told him that letter, those words, had kept her from swallowing every pill in her medicine cabinet that first Christmas without David. Nathan's fingers twitched against the hospital sheet. The monitor stayed steady, but Grace saw it clearly. His index finger tapping. 3 times. Pause. 3 times. Pause. 24 hours. The dogs had organized themselves into shifts. Morning dogs, mostly working breeds like Rex and Duke, took 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. Evening dogs, the shepherds and herding breeds, 2 to 10 p.m. Night dogs, the guardian breeds, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. People started bringing things. Mrs. Kowalski arrived with a pot of beef stew and paper bowls. Tom Rodriguez brought bags of dog food from his store. The Methodist church lady set up a card table with a coffee urn that seemed to never run empty. Someone, nobody knew who, erected a small tent for the volunteers to warm up in. Hand-painted signs started appearing. Nathan's pack. Heroes on 4 legs. Guardians don't always wear uniforms. Travis McKenna had been released on bail. His father, Judge Robert McKenna, had posted it personally. $50,000 cash. The judge stood on the hospital steps, talking to the Channel 6 reporter. "These animals represent a clear public danger," he said into the microphone. "My son was unlawfully detained by a pack of dangerous dogs that had been weaponized through military-style training. Your son was caught beating a man with a tire iron." The voice belonged to Margaret Kowalski, all 4'11" of her in her good church coat. "Ma'am, you don't understand the legal complexities. I understand what I saw. And what I recorded." She held up a small digital camera, the kind they sold at Walgreens. "I've been recording that alley for 6 months, ever since my grandson Timothy died." The judge's face went white as fresh paper. "Overdosed," Margaret continued, loud enough for the cameras. "From pills your son sold him, right there in that alley." 36 hours. Nathan's brain swelling had reduced enough for them to lower the sedation. Grace sat beside his bed with Walter's laptop, reading messages from the computer at the nurse's station. Tom's video from his flip phone had been put on the internet by his granddaughter. The news said 18 million people had watched it, though Grace couldn't imagine that many people even had computers. Channel 6 ran the story every hour. Newspapers from Philadelphia and Pittsburgh had sent reporters. The VFW Hall had become an unofficial headquarters for the veterans who'd started arriving. But there were other messages too. Legal papers delivered by courier, a lawsuit from Travis's lawyer, the bank moving up their foreclosure date, animal control citations about dangerous dogs. Ms. Mitchell? A man in a cheap suit stood in the doorway, the kind of suit you bought at J.C. Penney for court appearances. "You've been named in a lawsuit," he said, handing her a thick envelope. "The dogs that surrounded my clients are from a facility where you serve as veterinarian. You're being held liable for their training and actions." Grace read the number at the bottom of the first page. $3 million. Her hands shook as she set the papers down. 48 hours. Nathan's eyes moved beneath closed lids. REM sleep, the nurses called it. His hand clenched and unclenched against the sheet. His lips moved, forming words without sound. Grace leaned closer, trying to understand. "Ranger," he whispered. "No, boy, stay back, stay." The monitor spiked, heart rate climbing from 70 to 120. Blood pressure rising fast. Out in the parking lot, Rex stood suddenly, his big head tilted toward the hospital. Luna stopped her pacing. Storm's silhouette on the parking garage shifted, alert. Nathan's eyes opened all at once, like breaking through water after being held under. "Echo," he said, voice raw as sandpaper. "Where's Echo?" Grace grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "He's alive, in surgery at the veterinary hospital. He's going to make it." Nathan's eyes focused on her face, then shifted to the window. Through the glass, across the parking lot, Rex sat at perfect attention. Nathan raised his hand slightly, 3 fingers extended. Every visible dog sat down at exactly the same time. "They stayed," Nathan whispered. "They haven't left. Not once in 2 days." Nathan tried to sit up. Pain flashed across his face, and he fell back against the pillow. "The facility," he said. "Travis will—" "Shh, rest now." But Nathan's eyes had found the lawsuit papers in her lap. The $3 million figure was visible, circled in red by the lawyer. "Grace, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "Nathan," she squeezed his hand harder. "There's something else. Something you need to know about that night." She pulled out her phone, the basic one that only made calls and took simple pictures. She showed him a video that someone had sent an hour ago, recorded 3 weeks before the attack. On the tiny screen, Travis McKenna stood in the Mercy Paws parking lot at night, bolt cutters in his hand. The timestamp in the corner read 2:47 a.m., January 3rd. But it was what came next that made Nathan's heart monitor skip a beat. Travis wasn't alone. Another figure stood beside him, wearing a Mercy Paws volunteer jacket. The figure turned toward the security camera, and the parking lot light caught his face clearly. It was Walter Harrison. The figure on Grace's phone screen wore Walter's old Army field jacket, the one with the Korea patch on the shoulder. Nathan watched the old man hand Travis an envelope. Even on the tiny screen, he could see Travis counting bills, his thumb licking between each one like Nathan's grandmother used to do with her grocery money. Nathan's throat closed up tight. The heart monitor beside him started beeping faster. 90, 100, 110. "Keep watching," Grace whispered. On the screen, Walter led Travis to the quarantine building, the same building where Nathan had found the cut lock. Walter pulled out keys, his keys, the ones that hung from the Korean War memorial keychain his wife had given him before she died. He was showing him the dogs, Grace said, her voice flat as day-old coffee. "Which ones would bring the most money? Fighting rings pay top dollar for trained dogs they can retrain mean." Nathan's fingers gripped the hospital sheet hard enough to tear. "Walter loves those dogs. Walter needs dialysis 3 times a week. Medicare covers 80%. That leaves him $600 a month he doesn't have." Grace set the phone down on the bedside table. His nephew sent this video, found it on Walter's computer after they brought him here. Brought him here? Stroke, yesterday morning. He's in intensive care, 3rd floor. Can't speak, left side paralyzed. Through the window, Nathan could see Rex maintaining his position in the parking lot. The Rottweiler's head tracked something Nathan couldn't see from the bed. Then Luna stood up from her spot. Storm's silhouette shifted on the parking garage. car doors slamming, multiple vehicles arriving at once. Judge McKenna entered through the main hospital doors, flanked by 4 men in suits and 2 uniformed officers. Nathan could see them through the glass walls of the hallway, walking with the confidence of people who owned whatever room they entered. The judge's voice carried through the thin walls. By order of the district court, those animals are to be seized and evaluated for aggressive tendencies. Any deemed dangerous will be euthanized according to Pennsylvania Statute 189204. You can't do that. Grace stood up, moving to the doorway. Judge McKenna didn't even turn his head. The order's been signed. 48 hours for voluntary surrender, starting now. Nathan swung his legs over the bed's edge. His stumps hit empty air where his prosthetics should have been. The movement sent fire through his broken ribs. He grabbed the bed rail, pulled himself upright. "Those dogs saved my life," Nathan said, loud enough to carry. Now the judge looked. His eyes took in Nathan's stumps, the bandages wrapped around his head, the monitor still attached by wires. "Those dogs unlawfully detained 3 citizens. Your training has weaponized them. Under Pennsylvania law, that makes them dangerous weapons. They didn't bite anyone, not once. Irrelevant. The capacity for coordinated action combined with military-style training meets the statutory definition." The judge dropped a manila folder on the nurse's station. 48 hours, Mr. Coleman, or we seize them by force." Behind the judge, through the lobby windows, Nathan could see the dogs. They'd formed up again, 3 distinct lines like he'd taught them. Not threatening, just watching, waiting for orders that weren't coming. The judge left, his leather shoes squeaking on the waxed floor. Grace's phone rang immediately. She answered, listened, her face going pale as skim milk. "The bank," she said. "They've moved the foreclosure up. 7 days instead of 30. Nathan's hand found the bed rail again. 7 days. 48 hours for the dogs. Walter dying in intensive care. $3 million lawsuit. Everything falling apart at once, like when the steel mill closed and took half the town with it. His phone, the old flip phone the VA gave him, buzzed on the bedside table. Nathan reached for it, his fingers clumsy from the pain medication they'd pumped into him. Text message from a number he didn't recognize. "You don't know me, but I know you. Check your email. A friend from Kandahar." Nathan opened his email on Grace's phone. One new message, subject line. "Rangers lead the way." Inside, a single paragraph. "Brother, heard about your situation on the news. Remember Firebase Phoenix? Remember what you told us when we were pinned down for 6 hours? Sometimes the only way out is through. You saved 6 of us that day. Time to return the favor. Check Channel 6 in 10 minutes. Nathan looked at Grace. "Turn on the TV." She found the remote, clicked to Channel 6. A reporter stood outside the hospital, the dogs visible behind her in the parking lot. Remarkable development in the story that's captured the nation's attention. We've just learned that veterans from 5 states have started a collection fund for Nathan Coleman. They've raised over $200,000 in just 6 hours. Nathan's throat tightened. On the screen, a photograph appeared. Him in Afghanistan, Ranger beside him, both covered in dust from a sandstorm. But perhaps more significant, the reporter continued, is what's happening right now at the Mercy Pause facility. The image switched to a helicopter view. Nathan leaned forward, ignoring the lightning bolts of pain from his ribs. The facility's parking lot was full, not with cars, but with people. And dogs. Dozens of them, all sitting in formation. Veterans from across Pennsylvania and surrounding states have begun arriving with their service dogs, the reporter's voice continued. They say they're here to support the man who wrote the training manual that saved their lives. Training manual, Nathan had never written. Then he remembered, the notebook. 150 pages of handwritten notes he'd kept, documenting every technique that worked with damaged dogs. He'd made copies for a few guys from his unit who were struggling, told them how working with broken dogs had helped him process his own damage. Grace's phone rang. She answered, listened, then held it out to Nathan. "Nathan?" The voice was familiar but rougher, like someone had dragged sandpaper across it. It's Martinez, Staff Sergeant Martinez. Nathan's hand tightened on the phone. Martinez had lost his left arm in the same IED cluster that took Nathan's legs. Martinez, Shut up and listen, soldier. I'm 3 hours out with 12 guys from the unit. We're bringing our dogs. The ones we trained using your notes. American Legion Post 471 is mobilizing. VFW 2. By tomorrow morning, you're going to have more backup than you know what to do with. This isn't your fight. Like hell it isn't. You taught us that broken doesn't mean worthless, that damaged things can still serve. We're done letting you face things alone. The line went dead. Through the window, Nathan watched Rex stand suddenly. The dog's entire posture changed, not alert for danger, but recognition. The way he stood when he recognized someone from training. A van pulled into the parking lot. On its side, faded letters spelled out K9S for Warriors. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, empty left sleeve pinned up at the shoulder. Martinez. Beside him, a German shepherd wearing a service vest. Then another vehicle. A pickup truck with Marine Corps stickers covering the tailgate. Then a sedan with Army plates. Then a minivan with Vietnam Veterans of America on the side. They kept coming. Each vehicle discharged a veteran and a dog. The dogs took position with Rex's pack, expanding the formation. The veterans formed their own line facing the hospital. No signs, no shouting. No protest chants, just presence. Nathan! Grace's voice pulled his attention back. She was staring at her phone. You need to see this. Another video. This one from inside Travis's truck, time-stamped January 15th, 7:35 p.m. 6 minutes before the attack. The phone must have been in the cup holder because it caught Travis's face clearly. Travis's voice, slurred from drinking. Going to teach that gimp a lesson tonight. Been planning this for weeks. Walter says Coleman keeps cash in that shipping container. Probably disability money. Dean's voice from off camera. What if he fights back? With what? Plastic legs? Travis laughed, ugly and mean. The sides, Brody's got the tire iron. One good hit to the head and... The video cut off. Who sent this? Nathan asked. Grace scrolled up to check. Brody Novak. Nathan stared at the name. Brody. Who'd helped beat him. Who'd stood there while Travis brought that rebar down. Another message appeared below the video. I'm sorry, my son has autism. The therapy dogs at your facility are the only thing that calms him down when he gets overwhelmed. I couldn't let Travis destroy that. But I was a coward. I'm done being a coward. Through the window, the crowd had grown. Nathan counted maybe 60 veterans now. Their dogs sat in perfect formation beside Rex's pack. Some of the veterans were in wheelchairs, others on crutches. One had a white cane, his golden retriever wearing a guide dog harness. A news helicopter circled overhead, the thrum of its rotors rattling the windows. Judge McKenna's BMW pulled into the emergency lane. He stepped out, saw the crowd, stopped cold. His son Travis was in the passenger seat, face visible through the windshield. Even from the third floor, Nathan could see Travis's expression change when he recognized some of the veterans. Men from Murphy's Bar. Men he'd called heroes to their faces, while overcharging them for construction work that never got finished. The judge approached the crowd, waving papers above his head. Nathan couldn't hear the words, but he could read the body language. The judge pointing at the official documents. The veterans not moving. Not 1 inch. The dogs maintaining perfect discipline. Then something unexpected. From the back of the crowd, Margaret Kowalski pushed forward, still wearing her good church coat despite the cold. She held up her little camera, turned the screen toward Travis in the car. Whatever was on that screen made Travis sink lower in his seat. Nathan, Dr. Chen entered the room, chart in hand. You shouldn't be sitting up. Your ribs... He stopped mid-sentence, seeing the crowd through the window. Dear God, he said, there must be 200 dogs out there. Nathan counted the formations. Rex's original 47, plus maybe 60 more with the veterans, plus the strays that had appeared from nowhere, sitting at the edges like they understood something important was happening. 212, Grace said, checking her phone. Someone's keeping count. They're calling it the largest coordinated dog demonstration in history. Nathan's fingers found the edge of the bedsheet, gripping until his knuckles went white. All of this, the dogs, the veterans, the crowd, because he'd tried to save one injured German shepherd in an alley. No, that wasn't right. It was because 47 damaged dogs had decided to save him. His phone buzzed, another unknown number. Nathan almost didn't answer. A photograph appeared on the tiny screen. Walter in his hospital bed, awake now, a tablet propped where he could see it. The tablet showed the crowd outside. Tears ran down the good side of Walter's face. Below the photo, a message typed with obvious difficulty. "I'm sorry. Travis threatened my sister. She needs care facility. No money. Forgive me." Nathan set the phone down. His hands were shaking, and not from the pain medication. Grace touched his shoulder. "What do we do?" Through the window, Judge McKenna was backing toward his BMW. The crowd hadn't moved, hadn't threatened, but their presence was statement enough. Sometimes just witnessing was a form of resistance. Then Nathan saw something that made his blood run cold as January Creek water. Travis had gotten out of the car. He was walking toward the hospital entrance, and he was carrying something under his jacket. Something angular that pushed the fabric out wrong. Travis's right hand stayed inside his jacket as he pushed through the hospital's automatic doors. Nathan could see it all through the glass corridor walls, the way Travis's shoulder hunched forward, protecting whatever he carried against his ribs. "Call security," Nathan said. Grace was already dialing, her fingers fumbling with the phone buttons. But Travis wasn't heading for the elevators. He turned left toward the administrative offices, his boots leaving wet prints on the polished floor. Through the glass, Nathan watched him pull out not a weapon, but a manila folder thick as a phone book. Judge McKenna followed his son, his face the color of old newspaper. They disappeared into Administrator Hendrick's office, the door closing with a click Nathan could somehow hear 3 floors up. Nathan's phone rang. Martinez again. "We've got eyes on them," Martinez said. "3 of my guys are in the lobby, if Travis tries anything." The administrator's door opened. Mrs. Patricia Hendrick stepped out holding the folder, her face pale as flour. She walked straight to the elevator, her heels clicking like a typewriter on the tile floor. Nathan counted her footsteps down the hallway, 18 from the elevator to his door. She entered without knocking, didn't even look at him directly. "Mr. Coleman, I've just been served with an emergency injunction. If these dogs aren't removed from hospital property within 1 hour, this facility faces fines of $10,000 per hour. They're on public property. The sidewalk is hospital easement. We lease the park across the street for overflow parking." She set the folder on his bed. The papers smelled like fresh ink from a copy machine. "I'm sorry, but I have 800 employees and 4,000 patients to consider." Nathan opened the folder. Legal documents dense as bread pudding, full of citations and precedents. But one number stood out like a neon sign: $240,000. The estimated fines for a single day. Through the window, Nathan could see Martinez talking to the other veterans, his one arm gesturing sharp and angry. Some of the veterans stepped forward. Their dogs mirrored the tension, heads rising, ears perked forward. "They're going to fight this," Grace said. "No." Nathan grabbed his phone, hit Martinez's number. "Stand down." "Nathan, that's an order, Sergeant." Silence on the line. Then, "We don't leave people behind." "You're not leaving. You're following my lead. Get them to disperse. Controlled withdrawal, just like Firebase Phoenix." Nathan hung up. Through the window, he watched Martinez's shoulders drop. The veteran turned to the crowd, made a hand signal Nathan recognized from Afghanistan. One by one, the veterans began moving toward their vehicles. Their dogs followed, perfect discipline, even in retreat. But Rex's pack remained. All 47 dogs from the facility, still holding position. "What about them?" Grace asked. Nathan looked at the dogs that had saved him. Rex hadn't moved an inch. Neither had Luna, Diesel, Storm, or any of the others. Waiting for orders. His phone buzzed. Text from the veterinary hospital. Echo's condition critical. Needs immediate surgery. $8,000 required up front. Nathan's savings account had $1,847. The collection money the veterans raised was locked in escrow pending legal clearance. Everything he owned was either destroyed in the attack or worth nothing to anyone but him. Except, he looked at Grace. In his shipping container, behind the coffee tin, was a presentation box he hadn't opened in 2 years. Inside, his Navy Cross. Worth maybe $15,000 to a collector. Maybe more. The last piece of who he'd been before the IED took his legs and Ranger and everything else. "I need you to go to my place," he told Grace. "Top shelf in the container, behind the Folgers can. There's a box." "Nathan, please." Grace left. Through the window, Nathan watched animal control trucks arrive. 3 of them, with cages in the back. Officers got out carrying catch poles, those long aluminum poles with the wire loops on the end. The lead officer approached Rex. The Rottweiler stood up from his sitting position, not aggressive, just ready. The officer stepped forward. Rex stepped back. Forward, back. Forward, back. They were going to have to chase them. All 47 dogs through the streets of Scranton, through traffic, creating chaos and potentially getting dogs or people killed. Nathan grabbed his phone, opened the simple program Walter had helped him set up. Each dog wore a collar with a small transmitter, part of their tracking system. Nathan could see all 47 dots clustered at the hospital on the tiny screen. His finger hovered over the return home command. It would send a signal to each caller, a high-pitched tone only dogs could hear, triggering their trained response to return to the facility. But the facility was being foreclosed in 6 days. If he sent them back there, they'd just be seized at the kennel instead of here. Another text from the veterinary hospital. Echo going into cardiac arrest. Need decision now. Nathan's vision blurred. Not from the head injury. His finger shook over the phone screen. Save Echo or save the 47? Save the one who'd tried to protect him or protect all who had succeeded? The door opened, not Grace. Walter Harrison in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse. The left side of his face drooped like melted wax, but his right eye was clear, focused. Walter's good hand held a tablet computer. He'd typed something with one finger. "My fault, my sin, let me fix." The old man gestured for Nathan's phone. Nathan handed it over, watched Walter's trembling finger navigate to his banking app. The login took 3 tries with his shaking hand. The account showed $11,000. Walter's dialysis fund, the money keeping him alive. Walter initiated a transfer to the veterinary hospital. $8,000. His finger hesitated over the confirm button for just a second, then pressed it. "Walter, no." The old man's good hand gripped Nathan's wrist with surprising strength. His eye held something Nathan had seen before in Afghanistan, the look of someone who'd made peace with what came next. Walter typed on the tablet, "Already dying. Kidneys shot. This matters more." Through the window, Rex had been cornered between 2 animal control trucks. The officer with the catch pole moved closer. Rex sat down. The officer stopped, confused. The dog wasn't running, wasn't fighting, just sitting there, looking past the officer toward Nathan's window. "He's waiting for orders," Grace said from the doorway. She held the presentation box with Nathan's medal. "They all are." Nathan looked at his phone. 47 dots on the screen, waiting for his decision. Another message from the veterinary hospital. "Payment received, surgery beginning, Echo stable for now." Walter typed, "Send them home." "The facility will be seized." Walter kept typing. "I sold it, this morning, while Travis was here." "Sold it? To who?" Walter's mouth tried to smile, but only the right side moved. He typed, "Margaret O'Brien." Nathan stared at the screen. Margaret Kowalski, née O'Brien. The woman who'd been recording the alley. Who'd lost her grandson to Travis's drugs. Grace's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression changing. Echoes out of surgery, she said. He's going to make it. Something cracked inside Nathan's chest. Not a rib, something deeper. Walter typed one more thing. There's more, about Margaret, about why she bought it. The door burst open. Travis McKenna stood there, face twisted with rage, spittle at the corners of his mouth. You sold it? His voice cracked like a teenager's. You sold my land? Walter's good eye tracked to Travis. His finger moved slowly on the tablet. Never yours. You senile old fool. You don't know what you've done. Travis stepped toward Walter's wheelchair. You don't know who you're messing with. Travis's hand went to his pocket. This time, Nathan saw it clearly. Not papers, a knife. The knife was a buck 110 folding knife, 4 inches of steel that caught the fluorescent lights. Nathan recognized it. Same model his grandfather had carried for cleaning fish at Lake Wallenpaupack. Travis's knuckles were white around the wood handle as he moved toward Walter's wheelchair. Nathan rolled sideways off the hospital bed. His stumps hit the linoleum hard, sending electricity up phantom nerves. He dragged himself forward using his forearms, closing the 8 feet between the bed and Walter's chair. The floor was cold through his hospital gown. Travis! Judge McKenna's voice cracked from the doorway. Put that away! Travis's hand shook, the blade trembling like a compass needle. He sold it, behind my back, to that old woman. Son, don't. Travis's voice broke on the word. Don't call me son. Not now. Not after everything you never... He stopped, swallowed hard. You never stood up for me. Not once. Grace had backed against the wall, her phone out, the red recording light reflected in the medical equipment. Nathan could hear her breathing, quick, shallow. Nathan reached the wheelchair, used the wheel to pull himself upright. No legs to stand on, but he could put his body between Travis and Walter. You want someone to blame, Nathan said. I'm right here. Travis's eyes refocused on him. The knife shifted. You think you're some kind of hero? Travis stepped closer. Nathan could smell the bourbon coming through his pores, mixed with fear sweat. You're just broken, useless, a drain on the system. The door opened. Margaret O'Brien entered, moving with the deliberate pace of someone who'd buried children and kept walking. Behind her, 5 more elderly faces Nathan recognized from the neighborhood. Agnes Novak from the flower shop, Harold Chen from 2 blocks over, Betty Martinez, Dorothy Sullivan, Frank Patowski. Put the knife away, Travis, Margaret said. Her voice carried the same authority Nathan remembered from his grandmother. Your show is over. My show? Travis laughed, but it came out wrong, like a cough. 6 months we've been watching you. Margaret held up her tablet, one of those simple ones they sold at the drugstore for seniors. Every drug deal, every threat, every time you squeeze protection money from shop owners. She touched the screen. Travis's voice filled the room. Tell your grandma if she doesn't pay the $500 by Friday, her cat might have an accident. Shame if something happened to it. Travis's father stepped into the room. The judge's face had gone gray as old dishwater. Margaret touched the screen again. Another recording. The judge's voice this time. Just make sure there's no evidence. I can't protect you if there's physical evidence. Judge McKenna's legs gave out. He caught himself on the doorframe, his breathing shallow. We started watching after Timothy died, Margaret said. Timothy, her grandson, the overdose. Agnes lost her granddaughter, Sarah, Harold's nephew, Betty's son, Dorothy's neighbor's boy, all from pills bought in that alley. The 5 elderly people behind her nodded. Nathan recognized them now, not just neighbors, but the grieving. The ones who came to the facility sometimes, bringing day-old bread for the dogs, staying to watch them train. We couldn't go to the police, Harold said, his 90-year-old voice steady as granite. Not with the judge protecting his son. So we watched, we recorded, we waited. Waited for what? Travis's knife hand had dropped to his side. For proof that would stick, Agnes said. She held up her own phone, the kind with the big buttons for arthritis fingers. Like you threatening a disabled veteran with a deadly weapon in a hospital, surrounded by witnesses. Travis looked at all the phones, all recording, at his father slumped against the doorframe, at Nathan still positioned between him and Walter. The knife clattered to the floor. Hospital security arrived 30 seconds later. Nathan could hear their radios squawking as they came down the hall. Officer Johnson read Travis's rights while zip-tying his wrists. The judge just watched, silent, as they led his son away. Margaret approached Nathan, who was still gripping Walter's wheelchair for support. "The facility," Nathan said. "You bought it?" "For $200,000, fair market value." She pulled out papers from her purse, the kind of purse Nathan's grandmother would have carried. "But I'm 79 years old. I don't need a dog training facility." She handed him the papers. Nathan read them twice before understanding. "A trust?" "The Echo Guardian Trust, named after the dog you tried to save." Margaret's face softened just a little. "The facility will be run by a board, veterans and community members. You'll be the director. Proper salary, health insurance, and that shipping container gets replaced with a real house." Nathan's throat closed up. He looked at Walter, whose good eye was streaming tears. "Walter knew my plan," Margaret continued. "He came to me last week, confessing everything. Travis had threatened his sister in the nursing home, said he'd get her Medicare cut off, have her moved to a state facility." Walter typed on his tablet with his good hand. Margaret already had the evidence, but needed the land secured before exposing Travis. "The dogs," Nathan said. "How did they know to come that night, all of them at once?" Margaret and the other elderly people exchanged looks. "Mr. Coleman," Agnes said, adjusting her thick glasses, "your dogs patrol every night. We see them from our windows. 3 routes, rotating schedule. They check the homeless camps behind the old steel mill, the alley where the drug deals happen, the park where runaways sometimes sleep." Nathan stared at her. "That's not. I never trained them to do that." "You train them to guard and protect," Harold said. "They figured out the rest themselves. We have months of footage." Betty pulled out her phone, showed a video. The timestamp read, 3 weeks ago, 2 a.m. On the screen, Luna dragged a paper bag in her mouth to a man sleeping under cardboard. She dropped it by his hand. A sandwich from somebody's trash, but food nonetheless. Dorothy had another video. Rex and 2 other dogs standing guard around a teenager who'd overdosed, barking until the fire department arrived. Frank showed his. Diesel leading a confused elderly man with dementia back toward the nursing home at 3 in the morning. 47 dogs, Margaret said. Saving lives every night for over a year. Never asking for credit, never getting thanked. She looked at Nathan. Just like their trainer. Nathan's vision blurred. He'd thought he was teaching them. They'd been teaching him the whole time. That service didn't need recognition. That broken things could still protect what mattered. Grace's phone rang. She answered, listened, her expression changing to something Nathan couldn't read. "That was the veterinary hospital," she said slowly. "About Echo. When they x-rayed him for surgery, they found a microchip. All the facility dogs are chipped. Not a regular chip, military grade. The ID number." Grace paused, staring at Nathan. "It matches a military working dog reported killed in action. Afghanistan, 2022. Nathan's blood turned to ice water. "The dog's registered name," Grace continued, "was Ranger." The room tilted. Nathan's grip on Walter's wheelchair was the only thing keeping him upright. Ranger. His Ranger. Who'd thrown himself on the IED to save Nathan's life. Who died in Nathan's arms while he tried to hold the dog's intestines inside the cavity the shrapnel had torn open. Or had he? "That's impossible," Nathan whispered. Margaret stepped forward. "Mr. Coleman, there's one more thing we haven't told you, about who brought that dog to the alley. We have it on camera from 6 hours before the attack." She turned her tablet toward him. On the screen, someone in military fatigues led the German Shepherd into the alley. The figure moved with a distinctive gait, favoring the right side, the way someone would if their left arm was missing. Nathan knew that walk. Had seen it in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in every nightmare since. It was Staff Sergeant Martinez. Nathan's legs would have buckled if he'd had legs to buckle. Instead, he slid down Walter's wheelchair until he was sitting on the cold hospital floor, his stumps stretched out in front of him. The tablet screen showed Martinez clear as day, leading the German Shepherd into that alley 6 hours before Travis attacked. "Let me explain." Martinez stood in the doorway, his one arm raised like he was surrendering. The empty left sleeve of his jacket was pinned up at the shoulder, same as always. "Ranger died." Nathan's voice came out raw, like he'd been swallowing gravel. "I held him, felt him stop breathing. His blood was everywhere." "You held him. He stopped breathing." Martinez moved into the room slow, the way you'd approach a wounded animal. "But he didn't die. Corman Reeves got him breathing again during the medevac. 70 seconds without oxygen. Some brain damage, but alive." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, too fast, too hard. "They flew him to Germany," Martinez continued. "Then Walter Reed, same as you, different ward. Military wouldn't pay for rehabilitation on a dog with brain damage. He was scheduled to be put down." "You stole him?" "I adopted him, official paperwork." Martinez pulled out his phone, one of those basic ones from the VA, and showed a document on the screen. "Transfer of ownership, signed by Colonel Harrison himself. Called in every favor I had from 20 years of service." Nathan looked at the signature, the official seal, real. "But Ranger couldn't work anymore," Martinez said. "Couldn't follow complex commands, just basic stuff, sit, stay, come." The IED scrambled something in his brain. Nathan thought of Echo in that alley, the way he'd dragged himself forward on a broken leg, the way his tongue had touched Nathan's hand, warm in the freezing cold. "Why didn't you tell me?" Martinez sat down on the floor beside Nathan, his back against the wall. "Because you were dying inside, brother. Not from the missing legs, from the guilt. If you'd known Ranger survived brain damage while you got to come home and rebuild, it would have destroyed you. That wasn't your choice." "I brought him here 2 weeks ago," Martinez interrupted. "Been staying at the Motel 6 off Route 11, working with him every day, teaching him to trust people again. He escaped that night, must have smelled you somehow, tracked you. Even with the brain damage, he knew your scent." Nathan remembered Travis's words in the alley. "Should have stayed out of my truck." The dog had been looking for food, surviving like a stray. "The 47 dogs," Nathan said slowly. "They responded to his distress call, not mine. Ranger might be brain damaged, but he's still a military working dog. His alert bark is different from a regular dog's. Your pack recognized it." Martinez shifted, his shoulder popping. "They came to help their trainer, but they stayed because another trained dog called for backup." Grace knelt beside Nathan, her hand on his shoulder. "Echo, Ranger, he's recovering. The surgery went well." Nathan's throat felt like he'd swallowed sand. "He won't know me. The brain damage." "He knew you in that alley," Grace said. "Broken leg, dying, and he still tried to protect you." 3 months later, April sunshine warmed the freshly painted buildings of Echo Company K9 Training Center. Nathan stood on his new prosthetics. VA had finally approved the good ones, the kind that actually fit right, watching 47 dogs run through their morning drills. Rex led the pack in formation work, his black coat shining like oil in the sun. Luna practiced scent detection with 3 veterans from the new PTSD program. Diesel worked with a boy from the Autism Center, patient as the child learned to brush his scarred coat without fear. "Coffee?" Grace appeared beside him with 2 mugs, steam rising in the morning air. "Thanks." Their fingers touched as she handed it over. Nothing more than necessary, but he caught her small smile. Walter rolled up in his motorized wheelchair, the iPad mounted to the arm. His typing had gotten faster with practice. New recruits arriving at 10. 20 more dogs from a fighting ring bust in Philadelphia. The facility now housed 147 dogs in various stages of rehabilitation, with room for more since Margaret's trust had funded the expansion. "We ready?" Walter's good eye crinkled at the corners. He typed, "Margaret approved Building C, breaking ground next week." Through the fence, Nathan could see the memorial garden Margaret had insisted on. 7 small headstones for the overdose victims from the neighborhood. Timothy O'Brien, Sarah Nowak, the others. Their families came sometimes, sat on the benches, watched the dogs train, found peace in purpose. Echo's therapy session, Grace reminded him. Nathan nodded. Echo. He couldn't call him Ranger anymore. That dog had died in Afghanistan and been reborn in a Scranton alley, waited by the gate. The German Shepherd's gait was uneven from the amputation, and he couldn't process complex commands anymore. But he could do what mattered. Every morning at 9, Echo led Nathan to the prosthetic station, making sure they were properly attached. Every evening at 5, he reminded Nathan to take his medications. The pain pills, the ones for phantom pain, the ones for nightmares. When the phantom pain hit at night, Echo knew to apply pressure to Nathan's residual limbs until the nerves calmed down. Formation, Nathan called. All 147 dogs converged on the training field. Not just the original 47, but the new rescues, the VA program dogs, the community placements back for refresher training. They arranged themselves by size and temperament, a system Rex had developed without human instruction. Nathan raised his hand. Every head turned. Down. They dropped as one. Stay. Not a muscle twitched, not a tail moved. From the road, a news van pulled up. Channel 6 doing another follow-up story on the facility that had become a national model. Nathan ignored them, focused on his dogs. Release. Controlled chaos as dogs scattered to their assignments. Some to the veteran handlers working through PTSD, others to the children's program Grace had started. The night patrol dogs headed to their kennels to rest before evening rounds. They still patrolled, but now with official backing from the city. Echo remained at Nathan's left heel, always. Mr. Coleman. A young woman approached, maybe 25, holding a small mixed-breed puppy. I'm Sarah Thompson from Pittsburgh. This is Hope. She's deaf and partially blind. 3 vets said she should be put down, but I heard you specialize in dogs others gave up on. Nathan knelt, ignoring the servo whine in his left knee. The puppy sniffed his hand, tail wagging despite her limitations. We don't use the word hopeless here. He stood, gestured toward the facility. Grace will do the medical evaluation. Walter handles paperwork. We'll know in a week if Hope's a good fit for the program. How much will it? No charge for evaluation. If we accept her, you volunteer 20 hours a month. That's Margaret O'Brien's rule. Everyone contributes what they can. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. They all said she was worthless. They said that about every dog here. About me too, once. Nathan looked at Echo, who was studying the puppy with interest, his damaged brain still able to recognize another creature in need. Broken doesn't mean worthless. Damaged doesn't mean done serving. As Sarah walked toward the office, Echo moved closer to Nathan, his remaining rear leg steady despite the missing one. The dog looked up, and for a moment, Nathan saw Ranger in those brown eyes, the same devotion that had made him throw himself on an IED. But also something new: peace, purpose, home. Company, halt! From across the field, Rex had organized the morning shift dogs into perfect formation, without being asked, because it was time and he knew the routine. Nathan's throat tightened. He thought of Travis, serving 5 to 10 for assault and drug distribution. Of Judge McKenna, disbarred, facing federal corruption charges. Of Walter, hanging on month by month with his failing kidneys, but determined to spend every day he had left teaching hand signals to dogs who'd never known gentle touches. Of Margaret O'Brien and her coalition of elderly guardians, who turned a facility's debt into a community trust that would outlive them all. Of Grace, whose daughter Emma now worked with the therapy dogs every afternoon, her seizures reduced by half since she'd started. Of Martinez, who visited every week with other dogs he'd rescued, building a network of facilities across 3 states. Of himself, standing on legs that weren't his birth legs but were his nonetheless, teaching damaged creatures that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. Echo nudged his hand. Time for the morning patrol of the grounds. "Good boy," Nathan whispered, the words carrying weight. They walked the perimeter together, man and dog, both carrying scars that would never fully heal, both proof that the broken could still serve. Both finally home. I need to tell you something about that night in the alley. When those 47 dogs appeared, it wasn't really about me. It was about every person who'd ever knelt to offer them food when they were starving. Every child who'd petted them despite the scars. Every veteran who'd whispered their nightmares into understanding ears. Margaret O'Brien and her neighbors didn't just record crimes. They bore witness to quiet acts of grace. The dogs remembered every kindness, mapped every need in our forgotten neighborhood. They became the thread connecting isolated hearts, the elderly watching from windows, veterans fighting invisible wars, broken creatures society had written off. That night, they simply returned what they'd been given, proof that no one stands alone. Not really. Not when community means more than just living near each other. This is a work of fiction, inspired by stories of service animals and community bonds, created solely for entertainment purposes. This story does not condone, encourage, or promote any form of violence or harmful behavior. All characters and events are products of the author's imagination, and any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. The story aims to highlight themes of redemption, community support, and the healing power of human-animal bonds while respecting the dignity of veterans, elderly citizens, and all persons facing challenges.